We then see Carol with the walker in the dumpster. She gets up to the walker, and at first it seemed like Carol didn't want to kill the walker. We saw her struggle with the walker a lot, and that may be just because she was shot, but it did seem like she didn't want to kill it. We saw her sort of rip the walker's hair out, and that was an awesome effects move. I want to give huge props to Greg Nicotero on this effect because it was done very, very well. And I always love it when Greg Nicotero implements some really, really gory and gross out scenes in The Walking Dead like this, so I really love that. After that, we finally see that the Savior has caught up with Carol, and they wrestle a little bit, and he's like, "No, I've got the gun, don't even reach for it." And Carol starts to finally give up hope, and as the man shoots her in the arm, and there's something I want to point out about that. And the thing that I want to point out with that is that the man shoots Carol's arm, the arm where she used the sewed-in gun to kill the other Saviors, and I feel like it was sort of a notion where he could have shot that other arm, but he chose to shoot the arm that killed his men, and that was a really small thing that I did enjoy. As we're on this scene, I get this moment where I'm thinking this is one of those scenes as we always see in a TV show where someone, instead of just shooting the person, they wait around to kill the person that we don't want to die until finally another person comes around and saves that person, and I would have definitely thought this was just one of those stereotypical scenes. But the thing that I did enjoy about the way they handled this scene was because the man explained why he was waiting. It wasn't just like they were waiting to have this plot moment happen. The man was waiting because it throws it back to that episode 15 where he sees one of the Saviors die and he's just like, just wait a little longer now, what's going to happen? And he's talking about how you're going to slowly fade out of this world. And he takes it back to Carol and says, "I'm going to watch you die slowly just like I watched my people die slowly." And that takes it back to the moment where the man is looking at the Savior on the ground dying slowly, so he does the same thing to Carol, and I loved how they explained that instead of it just being a stupid stereotypical plot moment where they wait around until finally someone comes to the rescue, so I feel like that was done well. Carol expresses her happiness that finally she just doesn't want to worry about anything anymore, and that death is probably the best solution to all of her problems. She realizes that no matter where she goes, she's going to have to kill, so she finally accepts the idea of death, and this is where the man's like, "What, you bitch?" And that is something that Carol has been called throughout the season. Many of the Saviors all tend to call Carol bitch, and I kind of find that a little interesting, as if there's possibly something underlying there, as if it throws it back to her husband and how he talked to her in bad ways like that. But anyways, let's get back onto the topic. He shoots her in the other arm just to prove you're not going to go out easy like you think you are, and then that is where Morgan finally comes to the rescue, and as he was shooting Carol, I felt like the two gunshots were definitely interesting, and it explains why Morgan was able to find these people, because slowly he hears the first gunshot, and he doesn't know exactly where it's at, but he follows the direction, and then as he's getting really, really close to it, he hears another gunshot, and that finally leads him into the scene, so I thought that was done very well too. We see Morgan try to deal with this person peacefully at first, and I do feel like I had faith in Morgan using the weapon on the Savior because of the fact that he did accept the possibility of having to use it, in which he accepted the gun from Rick, and he accepted that idea that he actually might need to use this weapon. So I really, really loved seeing him finally do it, and the cool thing about it was he not only shot the Savior once just to injure him and teach him a lesson, he shot him multiple times and made sure that he was dead. Even after he shot him all of those times, he went up to the Savior first and made sure that he was dead. And I really love that because we see Morgan take a huge step in growth, and it was definitely something that I enjoyed. We finally see the other armored members of a different community. Now, I do have an idea of who this community could be, and I did do a video on it, but I'm not going to spoil anything for any people that don't read the comics. But it was awesome to see this community finally get introduced to the show, and Morgan's like, "I've got your horse," and we can assume that they take Carol and Morgan to safety and try and fix up Carol. Now let's move back on over to Rick and the RV group. Once again, they keep continuing along this path, and then they meet up with another dead end, and I just want to brag on this scene so much. This is the scene where we see an absolute ton of the Saviors, not just 16 or 17, we see about 50 or 60, and this time Rick is just like, "Go back." He doesn't try to count, he doesn't try to say anything with reason, he just says, "Go back," and that shows that Rick is starting to get worried, and it's one of the first points where we start to see a huge hint of hopelessness within Rick. I love the way that they blurred out all of the people instead of just zooming in and focusing on everyone, because the way it was just shot, I don't know how to explain it, but the blurring of all of the people at first just had a huge impact on me of the idea that these people are truly something to fear and that they have a lot of numbers. We see them backing up and retreating, and then Rick attempts to talk to Maggie and explain that there is still hope and they're going to get her to safety. And Maggie puts all of her faith into Rick, and we really see her put every single bit of that faith into Rick. And as we know throughout all of the seasons of The Walking Dead, just as Maggie is thinking, she believes that Rick can come through for all of them. We once again get the conversation where Rick is talking about how these people do have numbers, and how they are expecting where we go. They've got everything mapped out. They're at least 5 steps ahead of them. So they come up with a different plan, and this is where it gets dark, and we see the plan that Eugene is going to drive the RV as bait, and they are going to go through the woods with Maggie to try and get them to Hilltop. This was actually a really good move, and given the situation, Rick does have these plans that sometimes fail, but they are always effective and the most likely choice given the situation that they are in. I love the scene where Eugene is talking to Abraham and he's talking to Rick. Rick gives him some respect and he says, "You are a survivor." And then Abraham talks to Eugene and he's like, "You are a survivor. You and I didn't know that, but we know that now." And I love that scene. Abraham tries to give him a respectful, manly handshake, and Eugene just hugs Abraham. And I just really, really love this moment. This is just one of those instances of bromance that you really, really do like in a show, and I definitely love this scene. And I became a little worried for Eugene because it had a lot of emotional music, and then finally it transitions on to Rick and the gang moving Maggie in the forest as Eugene starts up the vehicle. And one more thing to mention about that was how Eugene asked Abraham why didn't he let him drive the truck, and that's because he didn't believe he could do it. And then Eugene finally gets his chance to drive the truck, and that was just a cool moment as well. Moving on, Rick and the gang are running through the woods and we hear that whistling, and like I discussed in the other video once again, one thing that I mentioned in that video was that I really hoped they would implement this whistling once again into an ambush scene, and it was just absolutely so intense to hear all of this whistling, and they know many saviors are around them because of every single whistle coming from every type of direction, and that is just something so intimidating if you put yourself in their places. And this was the moment that I recognized from the preview where you see a lot of spotlights come on the gang, and we see that happen in this scene as well. As the spotlights come on, it shows all of the people waiting around them. The RV is set up, and we know that there is no way out for Rick and the group this time. There's no escape, and they are there at the mercy of the saviors and Negan. I felt like this scene was done very well. I will brag on this completely. I feel like they couldn't have done this scene any better just because of all of the sound effects in the background. You can hear the frogs and all of the noise in the woods. But in addition to that, we see all of the saviors. We get a view of all of these people, and we know they aren't good people just by the way they look and what they've done throughout the episode. I loved how it seemed like a remix of one of the panels from issue 100 of the comics. We got some very awesome dialogue with Stephen Oggs, and he basically tells them that I tried to warn you all, but you're going to learn the hard way this time. And that's where they tell them all to kneel, and then we know shit is about to get extremely real. One thing that I noticed as soon as I saw that RV, I thought, please let Negan's introduction come out of that RV. That would be absolutely awesome. And I was so excited to see that finally happen, where Stephen Oggs is like, let's finally meet the man. And then Negan comes out there, and the shot of him is absolutely perfect. The shot of Negan and his dialogue was done so well. There's one thing that I do want to point out, and that was the cussing. I really wish he could have at least dropped one F-bomb. There was a moment where he said, "And I'm going to beat the holy hell out of one of you all for doing it." And that was a moment that I feel like if they had another cut, that's the moment where he's going to drop the F-bomb. And I feel like that was a very huge missed opportunity for that. Moving on to the rest of the scene, I love how he says it's going to be Pee-Pee Pants City real soon here. I love that. And then he said, "Is anyone pissing their pants yet?" And just to see him walk around and talk to everyone and basically tell Rick what is up is definitely a shock back down to reality. And one thing that I do want to note before the scene was that where they told Rick to kneel, when he was dropping his leg down, he was shaking. This was actually trembling. And when I saw this, not only did I think, holy crap, Andrew Lincoln is a fantastic, a spectacular actor, I also thought, this is bad. When you see Rick Grimes trembling before someone else, this is when you know it is bad, because he is afraid not only for himself, he's afraid mostly for his people. Moving back on over to the Negan introduction, I feel like it is the best introduction in television history. Just the way that they did that. I'm not counting the death here, but I'm counting the introduction. It is the best introduction, in my opinion, ever in TV show history. I love seeing the eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I loved where he talked to Carl, and Carl just stares him right in the eye, because Carl is done. He doesn't give a crap about anything. He just wants to kill these people. Then Negan makes the connection that Carl is Rick's son, and that's where you think, uh-oh, this could be pretty bad. I also loved how he explained that you killed my men, and you're going to have to pay for that. Then explains that he wants to break them down and make them work for him, and he wants all of their stuff, and if they try to separate them between a door, he owns that door and he's going to break it down, and that was definitely a good speech as well. But moving on to the eeny, meeny, miny, mo part, I thought that was done very, very well, but one thing that kind of ruined that a little bit for me was the fact that we were running out of time, and instead of just enjoying that moment, I was worried that we wouldn't get the actual kill by Negan, in which we actually didn't, but that moment was good if I wasn't worried about actually getting the kill. We finally get the shot where he says, "You are it," and we see the POV scene where Negan is finally slamming down Lucille on the person that he has picked, and one thing I did not like about this was that it did not seem realistic. It seemed very, very cheesy. But I also did not like the blood on the screen at all. I felt like the blood on the screen with Dwight and Daryl was a good tactic of not showing whether Daryl was alive or not, but this time the blood looked extremely cheesy, and I did not like that at all. Not to mention the fact that it was a cliffhanger. I absolutely hated that, and I feel like even though the rest of this episode was fantastic, it is going to go down as a bad rated episode because of this cliffhanger, because I know that start to finish went down as a bad rated episode because of that cliffhanger, so people are going to definitely be angry with that, and I will have my thoughts shared on this more this week, and I will talk about it, but this is basically my review. I thought this was a fantastic episode. Other than the cliffhanger, I thought Negan's introduction was perfect, the way they handled the whole Negan scene, except for the cliffhanger, and everything else that surrounded Morgan and Carol, and all of the other events that happened were absolutely fantastic, but the cliffhanger did ruin a little bit of that episode for me, and it did leave me with a little disappointment. So I would definitely love to hear about what all of you all thought about this episode, so make sure to leave your comments below. I really appreciate you all watching. It means a whole lot to me. Thanks again, guys. Peace out.